History calls her the Pirate Queen, a feminist icon, a master strategist. It's a great story, and it's a lie. Zheng Yisao wasn't a pirate captain, she was a CEO, and her business was terror. Forget Blackbeard's little gang, that's a rounding error. Zheng Yisao commanded an army of over 40,000. She didn't run a ship, she ran a corporation with its own navy, a spy network, and an HR department that solved complaints with a swinging blade. Her business model was brutally simple. Coastal towns paid protection, or they were erased. Merchant ships bought insurance, or their cargo and their crews vanished from the ledger. This wasn't rebellion, this was racketeering on a scale that would make modern cartels blush. So how does a woman from a Canton flower boat build a global criminal empire? The answer isn't just her own dark genius. It's about a government so corrupt and weak, it practically begged for a monster like her to take over. The background, the brothel worker and the pirate. Her story doesn't begin with a crown, it begins with a name you've never heard, Shi Yang. Born in 1775 into a world that had already decided her fate. By her 20s, she was working on the flower boats of Canton, a world of whispers and secrets, a place where powerful men let their guards down, and Shi Yang was listening. She wasn't just learning a trade, she was studying for a PhD in human weakness. She saw the levers of power, desire, greed, fear, and she memorized how they worked. Then in 1801, the most powerful man on the South China Sea walked into her world. Zheng Yi, commander of the infamous Red Flag Fleet. He wanted to marry her. Legend says she looked the Pirate King in the eye and refused. Flat out, not until he agreed to her terms. She didn't ask for silks or jewelry, she demanded a contract. Co-command of the entire fleet and an equal 50% share of the profits. This wasn't a marriage. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a wedding. For 6 years, they were a terrifying partnership. He was the sword, she was the mind behind it. She had become the partner of a king, but she had her eyes on the crown. And there was only one way to get it. The turning point, the widow's gambit. On November 16th, 1807, the king fell. Zheng Yi was dead. Some say it was a typhoon, others a battle, but for the woman standing in his shadow, the cause was irrelevant. His death wasn't a tragedy, it was an opening, a power vacuum. And in the world of pirates, that means blood. Fleets splinter, captains turn on each other like wolves. Everyone expected the Red Flag Fleet to tear itself apart. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Zheng Yisao didn't waste a moment on grief. There was no time for tears, only for moves on the board. She knew the captains wouldn't follow a woman out of respect. She needed an enforcer. The choice was obvious, Zhang Bao, her late husband's adopted son, his fiercest commander. She made him an offer he couldn't refuse, a partnership in power, and in everything else. With her mind and his muscle, they were unstoppable. Rivals were silenced, the fleet was secured. She was no longer just the wife of Zheng Yi. She was now Zheng Yisao, the leader. Her takeover was complete. But a pirate fleet is not an empire. To build a true empire, she had to turn her chaotic mob into a disciplined army, and she would do it with a code written in blood. The buildup, CEO of a criminal empire. Zheng Yisao knew brute force was temporary. True power requires structure. Bureaucracy. So she didn't rally her captains with promises of gold. She handed them a corporate manual, a strict, non-negotiable code of laws. The punishments were absolute. First, the finances. All plunder was brought to a central treasury. The captor kept 20%, a finder's fee. The other 80% went to the company. Anyone caught stealing from that central fund? Death. No appeals. Next, the chain of command. Disobeying a superior? Decapitation. But her most famous laws dealt with female captives. Let's be clear, this wasn't about feminism, it was about protecting company assets. A pirate could take a captive as a wife, but he had to be faithful. Assaulting a captive wasn't just a crime, it was a violation of company policy, punishable by death. Any consensual act outside that system, the pirate was beheaded. The woman was thrown overboard with cannonballs tied to her legs. With her organization now running like a machine, she could turn her attention outwards. It was time to unleash her army and begin the real business. The peak, the reign of terror. The Red Flag Fleet became an engine of commerce, and its primary product was misery. Picture a quiet fishing village, a place like any other. Now picture the Red Flag Fleet appearing on the horizon. For these villagers, it wasn't a choice between paying and not paying. It was a choice between paying and being wiped from the face of the earth. The ones that resisted became horrifying advertisements. In one raid, her pirates slaughtered 1,000 civilians. In another, 80 villagers who fought back were publicly executed. This wasn't chaos, it was marketing, and the message spread like a plague. It is cheaper to pay the pirates than to fight them. Her protection racket became the only government that mattered. She had created a monstrous system where her fleet was the only thing protecting you. From her fleet, her empire was no longer a nuisance. It was a wound on the side of China, a wound so deep the Qing government finally decided they had to act. They were marching to their own execution, and the pirate queen herself was sharpening the axe. The climax. The unwinnable war. In late 1809, the Qing government, backed by the Portuguese and British, assembled its ultimate weapon, a massive fleet sent with one mission: find the Red Flag Fleet and annihilate it. They found her anchored in Tungchung Bay. They had her trapped. Or so they thought. The government launched their grand strategy: fire ships, floating bombs sent to create chaos. But they had sent fire against a woman who was born in flames. Her pirates didn't scatter. They calmly boarded the burning ships, put out the fires, and salvaged the wood. The government's ultimate weapon became her new supply of lumber. Zheng Yisao waited. She watched the wind, and when the moment was right, she didn't just escape, she unleashed the fleet. A perfectly timed, brutally efficient counterattack that turned the hunters into the hunted. They shattered the blockade, captured dozens of enemy ships, and left the combined navies of 3 powers utterly humiliated. The message was sent, clear and bloody. The pirate queen could not be beaten. The war was over. She had won. And if you can't defeat your enemy with cannons, you have to find another way to get rid of them. The resolution, the golden parachute. The Qing government was broken. In 1810, they offered what they had left: a general amnesty. But Zheng Yisao wasn't taking a generic deal. She was coming to dictate terms, and she did it with the single most audacious move of her career. She walked, unarmed, into the Governor General's office. Who does that? Someone who knows they aren't the one in danger. The officials had prepared for a warlord. They got a master negotiator. Let's review the terms of this surrender. 1. She keeps all the money. All of it. 2. Her thousands of men get a full pardon. But that wasn't enough. 3. She demanded they be given jobs in the government. Her top commander, Zhang Bao, was made an officer in the very navy he had spent years humiliating. This wasn't a peace treaty. This was the greatest exit package in criminal history. She built an empire on terror and forced the government to buy her out. Her war was over. She had won. But what happens to a pirate queen when she's conquered everything? Conclusion: the tyrant's reward. Zheng Yisao didn't fade away. That wasn't her style. She took her fortune, settled in Canton, and became a respectable businesswoman, running a massive gambling empire. One last profitable enterprise. Think of the famous pirates of the West: Blackbeard, beheaded; Calico Jack, hanged. They all met a brutal end. Zheng Yisao died peacefully in her own bed at 68, surrounded by wealth. So was she a hero? Ask the thousands she slaughtered. The truth is more chilling. She was a ruthless genius who understood the world's true currency: power. She built a system so brutal and so effective, the government had no choice but to reward her for it. Her story isn't a tale of rebellion. It's a lesson in what happens when the systems meant to protect you fail so completely that the monster starts to look like a savior. I tell stories like this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.